Have you ever been the victim of getting the wrong Starbucks order in the drive-thru? Did it throw you into an absolute tailspin? Did it ruin the rest of your day? Did you willingly participate in your own victimhood and then share it with anyone who would listen? Did you give that mean barista who obviously intentionally ruined your day just a little too much power? I had a similar incident at the dairy bar window at the Indiana State Fair just a few years ago, where I gave that soccer club volunteer dad a little too much power, and it ruined the joy of my grilled cheese sandwich and strawberry chocolate swirl shake. Hello, friend. I'm Jen Eads, and this is the Brassy Broadcast. We're exploring the practices, processes, and habits that transform and support us to stand boldly in the legend of our own why. Amy Woodall makes a return visit this episode to talk about conscious habits. After you hear this episode, I encourage you to dive into the back catalog of Amy's previous visits. It's always a good time, and I'll have links in the show notes. Some of those greatest hits include episode number 28, How to Avoid Throat Punching Your Bandmates and Other Communication Strategies. Episode number 68, Communication Strategies to Navigate the Drama Triangle. And we did a 7-part series together called Enlightenment in the Modern World. I'll have links to all of those in the show notes. One more thing. We do use some grown-up language in this episode, so be mindful if you're listening around little impressionable ears at home, in the car, or even in the office. Here's Amy Woodall. Welcome back, Amy Woodall.
Thank you, Jen. This is so fun. I feel like anytime we're together, first of all, for those listening, we always record together, in Jen's studio together, because we kind of need the visual connection. And I started to re-listen to a little bit of the Enlightenment in the Modern World series we did. Was that 2018?
I think so.
Wow. Yeah, that was 10 pounds ago.
It's been a day or two.
It has been. And that was fun, and I think in one of those episodes, I joked about how you don't have to wear crystals in your underwear or eat granola. And update, Amy wears crystals in her underwear. And I'm a big fan of gluten-free granola.
Who are you?
It's the evolution. It's conscious habits, man.
It is. So let's just start right there with conscious habits. What does that mean to you? What is that to you right now?
All right, I have spent the last decade doing training and coaching for companies and teaching them how do you elevate your sales, right? And teaching sales process. And that then led to, wow, we can help these companies grow their sales, but if we're not teaching them how not to screw up the client relationship, we're not really helping them grow.
Right.
And so I helped develop something called the Customer Care Program. And I work for a company called Sandler. Some of you guys may have heard it before. It's the largest sales training organization in the world. And so I helped develop the Customer Care Program. And I'm like, okay, once sales sells something, I'm going to teach the rest of the organization how not to screw it up. So I went in teaching this. And I was like, wait, I'm hearing all this finger pointing and blame. And the hardest part of people's jobs isn't necessarily with the customer. It's dealing with difficult people and situations. And a lot of it internal infighting. Mm-hmm. And so I created the program for dealing with difficult people, thinking that would totally solve all the problems. And then my next epiphany, people don't know how to communicate with themselves, and they're making everyone else responsible. And so through my own practice and passion, I really was like, I feel like I'm meant to teach people how to tap into a deeper consciousness and connection with themselves so that they're not letting their thoughts and emotions, which are based on old shit.
Yeah.
So that they're not letting that get in the way of their happiness at home and their productivity at work and just all the places that it can follow us. So really it came from me just figuring out what wasn't the perfect solution and trying to find root cause.
I love it. So just digging a little bit deeper.
So for me, some of the things that I personally practice, because if I were to look back on like the Amy of 2 years ago, the Amy of 5 years ago, I think the biggest difference for me is how I'm able to watch things happening in front of me, watch the behavior of other people, watch, inconveniences happen, but not get entangled emotionally within them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I can kind of see the world, and it's not perfect, trust me, because I definitely fall off like being in this place, but it's now watching rather than experiencing. And it's a different lens to look at the world from. And combination of a ton of things, which we can dive into, right? Meditation and journaling and learning from other people and learning the art of surrender and just so many things that have added up to this place where I feel like, oh, I fully own my shit.
Yeah.
There can be drama unfolding around me and I get to choose whether or not I want to dance with it. And that's a great place to be, to feel like I have full ownership and choice rather than pointing the finger at the world.
At least with that, you've got some sort of control. I mean, you can't control what the other people are doing, but at least you can control your response to it. And like you said, how you dance with it or choose not to. How long did it take you to get to that point?
Ooh. Well, I'm still, it's still there, right? I think a measurement of, consciousness. And by the way, that word to me personally means awareness, ownership, and presence. Just, can I be uber aware of what's happening and take my own narrative out of it? Can I take ownership over why it's here? What part did I play in it? I'm not the victim to anything, right? My own thoughts and actions are creating my reality. So ownership, and then presence being, how can I make sure that my focus is in the right here, right now, and not in the anxiety of tomorrow or the judgment of yesterday? And that is where I measure my consciousness. But the measurement of how good I am at it as well is not never falling off. It's how quickly we can catch ourselves. And Jen and I were having a conversation before we hit record, and she sort of mentioned how she caught herself going off, something had pushed her buttons. And I'm like, but that's just part of the journey. The good news is you noticed it.
I did.
What many people never do is notice it. They never see it.
Horrible.
Great. I'm so excited for you.
I mean, it was like, why am I giving this guy who has a lot of power, it just felt like I was giving him even more in that moment. I'm like, screw that. I don't want to do that anymore.
There's a couple of things like sayings that I try to keep in mind. One of those is, he who angers you conquers you.
Oh, that's good.
And so I look at that like, okay, we give our power away every time. We're kind of like, here you go, you're in control of me. I think you're the problem, but really you're in control of me right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing is an Eckhart Tolle saying, which is, if small things have power over you, that's what you become, small. And I'm paraphrasing. I mean, it's much more eloquent than that, if you listen to Eckhart's words. But that's something else I keep in mind. So like, if my Starbucks order is wrong, right?
Yeah.
5 years ago, that would have been a reason for me to bitch, moan, and whine for at least half the morning, right? And I would have lamented to anyone who was willing to listen, because it's like for many of us, and I was certainly here for a long time, I felt like my drama had purpose and power. Like it gave me purpose and power. Like now I have something to talk about or to be frustrated about. But now if my Starbucks order is wrong, I'm like, I get to try something new and different. Or maybe that barista is having a rough day, so I'm going to take a minute and pray for their happiness.
Yeah.
Like it's just a shift in saying it's not that big of a deal. It's just not.
Because it's coffee.
It's coffee. And there's other things. Think of the million other things. I will hop on Facebook from time to time, which I always immediately regret.
Same.
But I do feel like it is my practice of consciousness, the amount of times that I type out the reply and then delete. I'm like, that's called growth, you guys. The amount of times you hop on and you see people just freak out about some experience they had, and just, then they get the train, because misery loves company.
Right.
Then you get the bandwagon of people who share about their terrible experience at the same place. And And it's terrible. We're just validating each other's, drama. So I choose differently.
One of the things that I want to do with this podcast is really get away from like the tips and the tricks and quick fixes and all that, because I feel like there's so much of that out in podcast land right now. And that just, it doesn't even resonate with me at the point where I am right now. I'm like, what are the practices? What are the daily practices and the processes? I want to get into that stuff, because what I've found in my own journey, whether it's been as a musician or learning Brazilian jiu-jitsu or podcasting or running a business, it's all about those practices and those habits. That's where the change comes. And that's where I can feel like those muscles growing and I'm growing because of the practices and the muscles growing. So what are those practices that are the foundation for you for conscious habits?
And foundation is such a good word to use, because I truly feel like that is it. I feel like doing these practices, which I'll share with you my own personal and how I am coaching and encouraging other people to through Conscious Habit Company. But when that's off, when my foundation is off, I totally feel it emotionally, physically, mentally, my energy, like everything is just off. And so I'm so grateful that I know how to get back to center. Again, it's not about falling off. It's just knowing like, okay, so I fell off. So at least I know how to get back on. Like I have the tools for doing that. And then first thing for me is a consistent meditation practice. And that's what that enlightenment in the modern world, when you and I sat down and did that 7 parts, something like that.
Yeah, I think 6 or 7.
And by the way, I think we planned it an hour before we recorded that too. It's just how our creative geniuses work. Actually, my coach calls it the 11th hour genius.
I love
Which
that.
I love. It sounds much better than procrastinator, because there's a sense of like judgment on ourselves when that comes through, right?
Yeah, but 11th hour genius, that's brilliant.
I feel like that's a great podcast.
I think it is.
So shout out to Des Garcia, who came up with that term, I believe. So meditation is big for me. And so many people have good, bad experiences, or maybe positive, negative connotation with the word meditation. Some people see it as spiritual, which feels like it steps on their religious beliefs. And, so I feel like we've got to untangle, for me, what meditation really is taking my brain to the gym.
Oh, totally.
That's what it is. It is strengthening that consciousness muscle. It is, as we talked about awareness, like at least you noticed earlier when you fell off, most people don't notice. That is the strengthening of the consciousness muscle. And so meditating 2 times a day is my preference and what I really shoot for. I'm not always 100% at that, but I can tell when I'm not doing it. Twice a day, 20 to 30 minutes is my personal practice. It just sets the tone, and I can tell when I don't do it. My family can tell when I don't do it. They're really good at keeping me honest and on top of it, because if I'm crunchy and I'm like snapping at small things, then they're saying, "Mom, did you meditate?" My husband's like, "Did you meditate? You need to go meditate today." And so that's the biggest practice. And there's so much of it out there that I feel like, if you're curious about it, you can go to YouTube. You could download an app. There's tons of those. And all you have to do is press play. You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be an enjoyable experience. My meditation teacher, Emily Fletcher, who's your meditation teacher too, she has a saying that you don't meditate to be good at meditation, you meditate to be good at life. When we can make peace with that, I think it's a little easier to be consistent with it.
Right.
I went through an online program with which, Jen, I'll call you out. You did too. And then I went to the in-person live before the world shut down. And it's called Ziva. And it just teaches you how to meditate. And I felt like that was important. The thing with any practice is it doesn't work if you don't do it, right? Like the knowledge is useless. Like you're talking about with these tools and tricks and tips, the knowledge is completely useless if you don't do something with it. So I feel like your why has to be bigger than your why not.
Definitely. And for me, a lot of it was I wanted to show up as a better human. I didn't want to be a cranky troll. I didn't want to go just off the rails if something didn't go my way. And it's funny because I kind of started this right before all of the pandemic and the shutdown and all of the chaos. And it's like, I don't know where I would be without it because I've never experienced all of this without it. But I just feel at the core that I have been able to navigate through things and just kind of ride it out because there's just an inner kind of calmness that maybe wouldn't have been there before. And I think it's made a huge impact just in my general state.
How you communicate and respond. And you know, here's the thing. I think we so often make other people responsible for our happiness without recognizing it. And what I was able to notice in meditation, we did talk about this in our Enlightenment in the Modern World, so I guess a little recap there is we have stress throughout life all the time. Small things make us stress, like traffic. Subconsciously, we're taking on the stress of that, paying bills, knowing we're financially responsible for ourselves and potentially other human beings. Like all of this has subconscious stress that adds on to us. And the more stressed we are, the bigger those buttons become. And if we think of the buttons meaning the things that get pushed that just set us off and cause us to be unhappy and anxious and depressed, which by the way, I'm not talking clinical depression. I'm talking like everyday being a human in the world depression. That cause us to feel lost and disconnected from the people around us. And I feel as though meditation, not only is it taking our brain to the gym, you know, but it's shrinking down those buttons. And the smaller they become, the harder it is for them to be hit. And so small things, again, no longer have power over us because we are doing the work. We're doing the work daily to manage that part of ourselves and taking ownership of our own happiness instead of expecting the world around us to behave in a way that keeps us comfortable.
Well, and one of the things that I've discovered too, and I think that the meditation piece has helped this because as I'm meditating and I can feel my mind wander, I'm like, I just don't get mad about it anymore. It's like, oh, just breathe and come back. And I kind of feel like that is really transferred into just beyond meditating. So, right, the not meditating to be good at meditating, but meditating to recognize when I'm losing focus, whether it's I'm editing a podcast or, you know, writing something or just doing something outside. It's like, oh yeah, there's no judgment with the, oh, you suck at this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, just come on back.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's something beautiful about that of like the connection you have to yourself, your body, your thoughts, where you are. It just brings the focus to you when you meditate. And I can feel it now. You probably are here too. I can tell when I need a meditation personally. I don't need my family to point it out to me. Sometimes I do. Like sometimes I'm just that disconnected. But I can usually tell. I can literally feel like a buzzing in my head. It's almost like I'm more aware, not to sound too woo-woo, but I'm more aware of my energy. And everything is energy, guys. That's not woo-woo. That's called physics. It is compressed light and sound. We're all made of it, just like a bunch of molecules squished together with the idea of form. And so you really can tap into and feel it. And again, without the judgment. That's another practice that I have, is understanding. You know, the meditating then helped me be more conscious and aware of other thoughts happening in my mind and recognizing where I needed to shift judgment to love. So my other conscious habit is I have a love practice.
Oh, tell me about that.
And boy, do I see love differently than I ever did before. And I think my longtime mentor, Tim Roberts, who, man, had the world not brought us together, like it's just so hard for me to fathom where I would be and where, you know, where my brain would be. I don't even think I would know how to spell meditation had I not met him. He just has introduced me to this part of the world of like thoughts become things, which was just an epiphany to me. And that's very mainstream now where it wasn't prior to. But Tim is an avid reader of a book called A Course in Miracles.
I need to read that.
Here's the thing. A Course in Miracles is, I mean, it is as thick as the Bible. It's not religious, although I think that it gets mixed in with that. A Course in Miracles was written by a woman in the 1970s. I think she started writing it in the 60s, but maybe it was published in the 70s. A psychotherapist who did not believe in God, and they were having a ton of infighting and drama in their workplace. And somebody said there has to be a better way. And so she went home and started writing. And it was basically channeled writing. So stay with me here, guys. Where she had, you know, this voice kind of channeling and writing through her. But here's what I love about A Course in Miracles. By the way, if you're curious about it, the Course in Miracles is legitimately gigantic. Like And it's hard to read through, but there is a student workbook at the back of the book that's so valuable that you can read one lesson a day and really figure out how to apply it to your world. There's some amazing teachers out there that are great to read and follow. One is Marianne Williamson. She might sound familiar because she actually ran for president along with about like 30 other people on the Democratic ticket for a hot minute. She has great, like if you were to just go on YouTube and listen to some of her conversations, she wrote a book called A Return to Love. That's amazing. There's a woman named Pam Grout, who is a great Course in Miracles teacher, has great books to read. And then also Gabby Bernstein, who's somewhat mainstream too. A lot of people know who she is. She wrote a book called The Universe Has Your Back. But here's what A Course in Miracles taught me about love. The opening line of A Course in Miracles says this: nothing real can be destroyed. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And here's what that means. If it isn't love, it isn't real. If it isn't love, it comes from ego. It comes from fear-based ego, the idea that something's wrong and putting judgment on it, etc. And so it created such a simplification for me of being like, wow, the world is not that complicated. It's either love or it's not. And when it's not love, what can I do to bring love to the table? So Marianne Williamson quote I love, seriously obsessed with her, is only that which I'm not giving can be missing in any situation.
Oh, that's really good.
So when I'm watching TV and seeing the shit show ensuing in various areas, and I will not make this political, but there's things that will push your buttons in certain political arenas, right? Or Facebook or wherever. I pause, and that is my next level of accountability. What am I not giving here that's missing? And so I'll stop and I will pray for the happiness of whomever I disagree with, because I can't hate their hate. That does not create solution. It doesn't mean I have to agree with them, but what is missing in their hate is love. That's what's missing. So how do I bring love to the table and understanding so that the conversation has a chance to pivot into the right direction? So I have a daily love practice. Before my meditations, I will kind of ask, like, who can I send love for today? And whoever pops in my head, that's the right person. Could be some rando that I haven't seen in 5 years. And I'm like, all right, I'm sending you some love. Before I do a speech, because I do a lot of speaking, I miss audiences, Jen.
I know, me too.
This is the first microphone I've had to I might just snuggle this microphone that I'm talking into. I've done talking, but virtually it's not the same. Still fun, but I will send love. I will picture sending love to that audience before I go into a sales meeting. I send love, and at least I know I did my job for the day. I feel like I'm doing my good deeds by making love just a consistent practice.
Something else that we kind of touched on earlier when we were planning this is you mentioned basically just sitting in the shit and that idea of positive thinking versus surrender.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, listen, there's times when we really, life might suck and there's rough stuff happening, but it's here for a reason and there's a lesson within it. And we have to sometimes just sit in the shit. And my coach Des and I talk about this all the time. We kind of co-coach one another. It's okay to just sit in it and surrender and say, what is this meant to teach me? It is here for a reason. If we don't get the lesson, our behavior and thoughts, whether you think this is coming from some bigger universal energy or whether it's your own creation, our thoughts and our behavior creates our reality, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're having just negative stuff happen to us and it just seems like we have such bad luck, rather than feeling like we're a victim to bad luck, we've got to own our shit. And we've got to just sit in it and be like, this is tough. And man, what is this here to teach me? And what is the lesson I meant to get? Because if you don't get it, it will come back bigger, hairier, uglier. And you'll have a choice to either play even more of the victim and go into the hole or surrender. Surrender. It's sometimes you just got to let it carry you. A book, and I'll reference a ton of books today. A life-changing book for me was The Untethered Soul. Literally probably one of the top life-changing books for me, written by a guy named Michael Singer. He wrote another book called The Surrender Experiment. And if you're an audio junkie, since you're listening to this podcast, it's great to listen to on audiobook or wherever it is that you listen to your audiobooks. But he shares his own experience about just being without judgment, without saying this is a good experience, this is a bad experience. He's like, well, it's here, so it must be meant to be. Kind of like that tree's here. I didn't have to think about that tree being here. It just is here because that's the evolution of what's happening. The leaves fall without me having to be anxious about it. It's just going to happen. And so his story of surrender is so inspiring. He was the founder of a multi-million-dollar company and had federal charges come against him for possible, I think he was being indicted on embezzlement or something of that nature. And it never shook him. It never shook his peace. He just went with like, all right, well, that's interesting. We'll kind of see where this goes. Never oh my God, what am I going to do? This is terrible. My life is over. My reputation is ruined. Or none of that. Or not even the positive thinking of like, everything's going to be great and this is amazing. It was just, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. That's it. Surrender. So I don't think we don't always have to be positive, but I think it's good to know when to stop white knuckling it.
Well, and I think I almost go the other way of the positive and trying to see the good in it. I'm like, no, like I feel like sometimes I just need to back off and just sit in it.
That's the true meaning of faith. And however you associate faith, whether for you it's religious or spiritual or nothing at all, just like a surrender moment. But that's really what faith means, is kind of being like, okay, I just have to I will trust that I'll get the lesson.
Yeah.
I trust that it's going to end up fine. And this has been a week of testing that for me, by the way, of like, it has been so—
Do tell.
Oh, okay. So let me start off Monday. It's Monday morning. I did my meditation. I'm feeling pretty good. Phone rings and I'm like, I don't know that number. So I'm just going to let it go to voicemail. Listen to the voicemail and I hear, Amy, we're just making sure you're okay. You were supposed to be here at 10 to record your session. Just hoping everything's fine. And instantly my butt puckered and I wanted to vomit. I was like, oh, so do you know what happened? I agreed to be a speaker on a summit series and they were pre-recording the sessions. And I missed my studio time. So a whole production team waiting for me. It was not on my calendar, completely missed it, which doesn't happen, right? And I did feel the guilt and the judgment.
Right.
I felt really bad. Fortunately, I'd had enough experience with these folks before that they knew like this isn't an Amy thing. So it wasn't my first impression or it would have been really bad. So we were able to get it rescheduled. It's actually tomorrow morning. And so I'm like, okay, it's fine. I take my kiddo to get his learner's permit. He didn't pass. He was devastated.
Oh.
Just Tuesday was a day of like driving everywhere and like nothing came through, waiting and we can't help you. And it was just really inconveniences, right? But Amy from 5 years ago, I would have so grabbed onto that and had a reason to like go home and have 6 beers and just like bitch and whine and, like so much. And then yesterday took my another kiddo for an MRI and my car breaks down. I have to have it towed. And it was just kind of like planes, trains, and automobile yesterday. Right. Really tough meeting, anyways, it was just out of the ordinary. And yesterday I just was able to be like, I'm going to just be okay. Like, I'm just going to stay centered, chilled. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to like jump off the emotional cliff because we will figure this out. My track record of things being worked out are pretty damn good so far.
Right.
And me worrying about it only creates less happiness in this moment. So why? Why? It just, when they call me and tell me what's wrong with my car, I'll make a decision. We either fix it or I buy a new one. That's it. Like, but however, I will say, seriously, a few years ago, I would have just been, oh my God, my car's broken and I hope it's not this and I hope it's not the $5,000 and oh my gosh, what if it's, I would have just talked about it and it would have been crazy. And I would have totally given my happiness away to it. Now I'm just like, whatever. It's like getting coffee. It's just another thing. It just is. I've got a sweet little rental car that Jen got to see out there.
I did. It's pretty hot.
It's so precious.
And you have that car for a reason.
That's right. I do have that car for a reason. Well, you know what's interesting is where they ended up towing my car to and who was fixing it is literally 2 blocks away from where my missed talk on Monday is. So tomorrow when my car is supposed to be ready, I will literally be 2 blocks from there, having done that speech and things being moved. So there is a piece of me that I'm like, I'm just going to surrender. And like the puzzle pieces are being put together. I don't even know what the picture looks like yet, but I'm just going to trust the puzzle pieces they're going to fall in line.
I love that. That's a really good visual. I need to start thinking that way. I like that.
Do you ever follow Esther Hicks? She's a little out there.
I do not. I mean, I know who you're talking about, but no, I don't.
It's a little out there, right? But she talks about
the woman with crystals in her underwear.
This is true. Listen, Jen, my heart chakra really needs to be open. So I have my rose quartz in my bra. Okay. You know what's really fun is when you wear them in your pockets, because I seriously did this before speaking. I would wear certain ones in my pockets because there are some that are supposed to be good for opening communication channels. And then you go pee before you speak and like your crystals are falling out on the floor. Like, don't mind me. Hey, excuse me, ma'am. Could you just kick that crystal back underneath the bathroom stall? That'd be great. And then I get on stage and they're like, who the hell is this weirdo? Oh, it's amazing, but whatever, it
works for you.
It works for me. It's whether it's a placebo effect or not, placebos can be very, effective in helping us channel what we believe to be true.
I love it. I love all of this. Thank you so much. This has been a really fun dive into all of your practices and thoughts and things that are coming down the pike for you. So as we start to develop these practices, what are those, and I'm not going to say like tips and tricks to help us get started, what are the baby steps? Because that's typically where I need to start with something that doesn't feel overwhelming, because I just finished reading Atomic Habits.
Ooh, it's so good.
Yeah, and he's very much about the baby steps. Mm-hmm. And I took baby steps yesterday on something that I was like stuck in. And I was like, the story that I had made up in my head was so not true after I did one thing. I was like, really? This was holding me back? This was dumb.
I love that. Those epiphanies are big, though, because they do come in other areas. By the way, Atomic Habits, amazing book if you've not read it. And it coupling habits is really important. Like they'll say, if you forget to take your vitamins, put them by your toothbrush, because the brushing your teeth is already a built-in habit.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to start something brand new, just add it to something else you're doing. So some baby steps. When you're making your coffee or whatever your current morning routine is, just make it easy to be mindful. So maybe it's you have a journal by your coffee pot. And when you go to make your coffee, you're going to pull that journal up and you're just going to write out an intention for the day. That's one step in mindfulness and consciousness, is just being aware of your own intention. Like, how am I showing up? What's my goal for the day? Maybe it is downloading the app on your phone for meditation or mindfulness. And the minute your alarm goes off, that's the next app you open instead of Facebook or email. It is, I'm going to open an app and I'm going to immediately do a 5-minute meditation. The thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Magic happens with the baby steps. Climbing a mountain happens one damn step at a time. You don't just like wrinkle your nose and end up at the top. It is the one step. And it's when you look back that you see how far you came. It doesn't seem that big of a deal in the one step, but it's the hindsight that's like, wow, that's when you could blow yourself away. Just like Amy 5 years ago, she would have been a shit show with all of this happening, right? One other practice that I think can be helpful, and that goes into a baby step that can be helpful. Many of you may have heard the practice of the life wheel. And do you know the life wheel exercise? So drawing out the life wheel and cutting that into 8 pieces, and you put different parts of your life down: your career, your health, your spiritual connection, your finances. And I think it's a good baby step to say, which one do I feel the most depleted in? Mm-hmm. What is my story? What is my story about that pie? Like why is it there? What's my head trash that's in the way, et cetera? And then what do I want to do to be more conscious there? What's one step I can take today to be more intentional, more conscious, et cetera? And again, maybe that's a meditation where you visualize you being where you want to be. Maybe it's a journal of writing an intention, but what we focus on expands. If we're focusing on the hard, life gets so much harder. If you're focusing on the good, damn, does it get better.
Yeah. I'm going to focus on the love now too.
Man, is that a good practice? Because here's the thing, can I just like one last tangent before we wrap up, is in truth, like nothing on the outside can be as sweet as love on the inside. We are searching for it all the time and like buying the next new car and getting the next client and finding the next right lover and like all of these things that we think, that's where the love is. That's where the love is. But in truth, it's in you. You're made of it. If you put your focus there, the outside becomes even sweeter and nothing can take that internal love away unless you allow it to. That in my mind, is the ultimate idea of consciousness.
And we'll just leave that right there. I love spending time with Amy because I always feel like I learned something new. In between working on this episode yesterday and this morning, I went to vote. As I was standing in line, a fellow walked out of the building wearing a mask that would usually cause me to make a snap judgment. Rather than making up stories about what a terrible, awful person he must be, I took a breath and sent him love. As I work on this episode, we are nearing the end of the 2020 presidential election. Regardless of which side gets the most votes, I'm going to continue to work on this practice of sending love, because there is so much healing that needs to happen throughout the U.S. and the world. I'm inviting you to do two things right now. The first is to make a commitment to practice love. The second is to share this episode with someone that you know needs to hear it, or share it on social media and tag me. I would love to hear your thoughts and the conscious habits that you practice. Connect with me on Instagram at BrassyBroadJen or on LinkedIn and send me a message. You can also connect with Amy on LinkedIn. I'll have a link to her profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Now get out in the world, practice love, and do some good.